everybody, my name's Elise. I am the adult nutrition educator here at Olive Gardens, and I'm going to be sharing with you how to make Pico de Gallo with a spin. We're going to be using some seasonal fruit we have growing here, and we're going to put some peaches in it. That's going to make it sweet, and so we're going to have like a sweet savory flavor. You can serve this with fish or chips and all sorts of different ways that you would eat salsa or just regular Pico de Gallo. And so we'll get started with the ingredients. You're going to use a tomato, any tomatoes you want. At the garden we have these really beautiful heirloom tomatoes growing, so I'm going to be using those. We're going to use an onion. The recipe that you're going to get is going to say a red onion, but I just had this little yellow onion today, so we're going to use that. We're going to put a little bit of heat in there with our jalapeno. We're going to use some cilantro, and I'm actually going to use the stems of the Swiss chard to have a little crunch in there. So that's a good way to use up your Swiss chard stems or any other stems if you wanted to instead of composting them. Okay, so we're just going to get started chopping. So first of all, I'm going to start with my tomato. I'm just going to use the medium-sized tomato for this version here. I'm going to start with my bread knife. I'm actually going to use a bread knife to cut this tomato because I think a serrated knife, which is when it has these bumps that's serrated, cuts a tomato much easier versus a straight edge knife. So I'm going to be using this to cut my tomato into bite-sized chunks. And these are really juicy tomatoes. If you're using Roma tomatoes or another sort of tomato, they're not as juicy, but I like the juiciness of them for this particular Pico de Gallo because it feels like summer. So I'm just gonna slice that up all into bite-sized chunks. We're gonna use the whole tomato. This is something you can do with your kids. If you use a steak knife even, that would be a good serrated knife. If you don't have a bread knife, this is actually a bread knife. Just make sure to watch your fingers. Using the claw action, you can keep your fingers out of the way. I just love Pico de Gallo in the summer. It gets me thinking about all the fresh flavors from the garden and putting in that sweetness of the stone fruit is going to be delicious. Okay, so we've got our tomatoes chopped. We're going to put them in our bowl. We're going to move on to our onion next. I'm going to take my straight edge knife, chef's knife. I'm going to cut half of my onion. I'm only going to use half of the onion. Even though it's a little onion, I'm still only going to use half. We don't need that much. It's got a strong flavor. We don't want to overwhelm the dish with too much raw onion. So we are just going to chop this into really very small pieces, which is called a mince. One way and then mince it the other way. The smaller, I think, the onions in this Pico de Gallo, the better, because you don't want a whole bite of an onion in your mouth. So small is best for me. Slice it up. And then you can even run your knife one more time through it. And then actually using the back of my knife, I'm going to put these in. If you run the blade of your knife over your cutting board, that can dull it faster. So we use the back of our knife to push everything in there. Next, I'm going to use our secret ingredient, our peaches. So I'm going to cut these in the same sort of chunks, the same size chunks as my tomatoes. And these peaches are from our peach tree here at Olivewood. And one of my favorite things about the summer is being able to eat any kind of fruit straight from the garden. When you get something that is warmed from the sun and just perfectly ripe is maybe one of my favorite things about working in a garden. We're gonna do both these because they're sort of on the smaller side. So for this recipe, any sort of sweet stone fruit would work really well. You could use peaches, you can use nectarines, you can even use mango as a really great sweet fruit that you could put in here. You can use pineapple, anything that's gonna have that sweet and delicious flavor to balance out your savory flavors, I would go ahead and try. Here's our peaches. And then I'm just going to strip my cilantro from the stem. I actually don't mind a little bit of stem in there. I've heard that the stem can be good for your spine. Some things that mimic nature and mimic your body can, so some things in nature that mimic your body can be good for that piece of your body. So like, for example, walnuts are good for your brain, stems are good for your spine, things like that. So we're just gonna put this in a pile and just run our knife through it a couple of times. Fresh herbs are better for these recipes if you can get them. Herbs are something that you can grow easily on your back patio. If you don't have a lot of space, you can do them in containers, which Leonard will be talking about in these videos. Next thing we're gonna do is our jalapeno. If you don't like it really spicy, I'm gonna slice it down the middle. I'm gonna take out some of these seeds because that's where your spice is, in the seeds and in the white pith. If you like it really spicy, go ahead and keep those seeds in there. Remember, don't touch your face afterwards. Okay, so I'm also gonna chop this really fine, similar to the onion, so that we don't get a big bite of spicy flavor in our mouth. It's sort of gonna be more uniform throughout if they're tinier. So I'm gonna chop this whole thing up. It was a pretty small one. We're just gonna go ahead and mince all of this. Very fine mince. If you can't chop them this fine, that's okay too. It's just how I prefer. Gonna put that in there. And then our last ingredient is our fun added ingredient. It's just our Swiss chard stems, and then you can use the Swiss chard. You can saute it with some garlic for dinner. I'm just gonna use 2 of them here. It gives like a really nice crunch. It gives a little bit of nutrients. It has similar to the crunch and flavor of celery. It's got some saltiness to it. So we're gonna mince these up pretty fine as well. And this, I just really like using these because it's a way to make it zero waste, using all of the pieces of a fruit or vegetable, and gives it and so if you're going to use your Swiss chard, it just brings out a really nice color to the bowl and the mix. Those pinks, and we even have these different color Swiss chards. So that's just a way to reuse your use all of the ingredients that you have. And then I'm just going to put a little bit of salt, pinch of salt, and pinch of pepper. And then we need to toss it up. And all of these beautiful flavors are gonna, it's called marrying them together. We're gonna let these marinate together, all of these flavors. You can eat it now, you can serve it later, or you can store it in your fridge for up to a week. All of these beautiful colors come together to make this vibrant Pico de Gallo with peaches. Thanks for joining. Hope that you enjoy all the rest of the videos, and if you have any questions, let me know. Bye.